This is Part 2, Episode 129. No wonder it's the hand that protects the nation. This indeed an extremely strong Soul Engineer Legion. Hui Yuhao silently compared the evil Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion to the Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion. He immediately felt that this Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion was even stronger than the evil Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion. Perhaps the difference in their overall fighting strength wasn't very obvious. However, the Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion was evidently better in terms of the details. As he thought, Hui Yuhao immediately flew into the sky. Even if he was discovered, he couldn't make this trip for nothing. The oscillation detectors below were scanning everywhere, including the sky. Hui Yuhao wove and turned in the sky with the help of his spiritual detection, avoiding detection by his enemy. His motive was simple. He at least had to destroy the batch of aerial surveillance soul tools in the air and cause some damage to the Sun-Moon Empire. Furthermore, it would make it more convenient for him in the future if he wanted to spy on this Soul Engineer Legion. However, his expression suddenly changed before he could fly to the altitude of the aerial surveillance soul tools. As he extended his spiritual detection upward to find out the exact location of those aerial surveillance soul tools, they quickly shifted and got into a very weird formation. Shit! Before he even had time to be shocked, Hui Yuhao reacted without any hesitation. He continued flying upwards, but in addition, he also burst out in a diagonal direction at full speed. Indeed, the moment he moved, a huge invisible web from the sky fell. This huge web was made from hundreds of aerial surveillance soul tools. They unleashed soul power undulations that came from oscillation detectors. The soul power unleashed wasn't strong, but it came in streaks and was very dense. When the web fell from the sky, it covered almost the entire sky above the military base. The reason why Hui Yuhao felt that things were amiss earlier was because the aerial surveillance soul tools had fallen from an altitude of 1,000 meters to 500 meters. Something had to be going on if they all fell collectively. This was why he had reacted immediately, and he was right. These aerial surveillance soul tools all contained the ability of oscillation detection, and they bore down as a huge web. No matter how powerful Hui Yuhao was, he couldn't possibly avoid them all. The undulations couldn't cause him any harm, but Hui Yuhao soon felt his skin numbing. Without a doubt, he had been locked on. Streaks and streaks of intense red light shone below. Following this, more than 50 beams of piercing red light rose into the sky and shot straight towards where Hui Yuhao was. These fiery red lights covered hundreds of square meters around him, with him at the center. There was no way he could avoid them. These were high-temperature scorching rays. They were at least Class 5 soul tools. Such rays couldn't pose any harm to Hui Yuhao, but they were definitely the most rapid attack the Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion could unleash in the short term. Their aim was also very simple. They wanted to stall Hui Yuhao before deploying other attacks against him. As these scorching rays shot towards him, more than 10 figures had already risen from the base into the attack. From their auras, it was evident that they were at least Class 7 Soul Engineers. One of them was even a Class 9 Soul Engineer. They were all flying towards Hui Yuhao at the quickest possible speed. Damn it! They are too ruthless. Hui Yuhao was a little depressed right now. However, his greatest potential was always unleashed whenever he was facing danger. A layer of icy jade glow emanated from his body. His 7 soul rings shone brightly. If the soul engineers from the Sun-Moon Empire could see these 7 soul rings clearly, they would certainly be astonished. There was 1 red and 4 orange gold, followed by another 2 red soul rings. These were the 7 soul rings that Hui Yuhao possessed right now. He controlled his snowy dance of ultimate ice and unleashed it within a small region. All the scorching rays turned to nothing when they entered this region. The beams of scorching red light only added large patches of mist in the sky and didn't serve to stop Hui Yuhao at all. Hui Yuhao turned into a beam of flowing light and flew downwards diagonally. Right now, he had already been locked on by oscillation detectors. His highest priority was to charge his way out from the region covered by those oscillation detectors. Otherwise, even if he had wings, he wouldn't be able to fly out of the grasp of the enemy's top-ranked soul engineers. As he completely unleashed his soul power, his Eye of Destiny opened. His soul core revolved quickly, an immense spiritual power shot out from his head. His spiritual power was very strong. After it appeared, it immediately turned into a spiritual windstorm in the sky. Spiritual blast? Huiyuhao's spiritual blast basically engulfed the entire area spanning a diameter of 500 meters. It wasn't targeted at any soul master, but at the oscillation detectors in the air. Spiritual power could generate undulations too. Under the effect of his spiritual blast, all the undulations within this region immediately went haywire. Huiyuhao knew that he couldn't immediately charge out from the engulfment of the huge web. Those aerial surveillance soul tools were chasing after him based on the direction he was escaping in. With the soul engineers below him to stall him, how could he successfully escape? This was why he had to disrupt the enemy's knowledge of his exact position. At least he had some free room to move about within this region now. Indeed, the moment he unleashed his spiritual blast, the second round of attacks that was supposed to come towards him from the ground was silenced. An area 500 meters in diameter was rather large. Huiyuhao needed to use this limited amount of time he had. His body was still positioned diagonally downwards from earlier. He had already quickly put a flying-type soul tool on his back. After stabilizing his body in the air, he immediately burst up like a shell and shot straight upwards. Go down? The bottom was completely covered, there was an elite force of soul engineers on the ground, and there were even aerial surveillance soul tools that formed a huge web in the sky. Huiyuhao was truly trapped. The only escape route was up. It was only by breaking free from the web that he stood a chance of escaping. Furthermore, the attacks that came from below would also weaken as they moved progressively farther through the air. Huiyuhao was a Class 7 soul engineer himself. He still possessed a deep understanding of soul tools. This was why the only escape route was above. The aerial surveillance soul tools were roughly at an altitude of 500 meters. Under the influence of his spiritual blast, Huiyuhao wasn't able to carry out any detection in the region that he was in. However, he unleashed his spiritual interference as he charged up. Even though his spiritual interference wasn't as effective as his spiritual blast, it still had some confusion effects under the influence of his earlier spiritual blast. After rising a few hundred meters into the sky, he was finally discovered again. However, his exact position wasn't exposed, even though one could roughly gauge where he was, because of his spiritual interference. Right now, he was very calm. He had faced more perilous situations on many other occasions. He knew that he needed to remain calm in a situation like this. It was only by remaining calm that he could increase his chances of survival. He continued to unleash his full strength and didn't even look at the soul engineers that were pursuing him. Ordinary soul tool attacks couldn't harm him at all. If advanced tier soul tools couldn't lock onto him, their strength was also limited. After all, there were very limited soul tools like the Death God that could unleash area attacks with such great and terrifying destructiveness. The Sun-Moon Empire had evidently discovered his intentions. The aerial surveillance soul tools in the sky started to rise higher and higher. Huiyuhao wouldn't give them such an opportunity. At this moment, he was only a few hundred meters away from these aerial surveillance soul tools. As he flew up, he was already putting another type of soul tool on his back. Light started to shine brightly, and Huiyuhao accelerated amidst strong soul power undulations. During this process of acceleration, he curled his body up to the point where he resembled a cannon shell. Not far from him, the soul engineers were shocked as they pursued him. Is that a soul thruster? However, this soul thruster that this person is using is a little too overpowered. Can his body withstand such strong forces? They didn't know that Huiyuhao had already unleashed his Ice Empress armor to protect himself as he used his soul thruster. Furthermore, he was also very strong, comparable to a title Doluor. Even though it was still a little overwhelming, it wasn't as intense as the soul engineers were predicting. Huiyuhao quickly closed the gap. His eyes flashed with cold light, and he stomped with his right leg. Following this, the star anise mysterious ice grass surfaced from behind his back. It revealed an icy blue halo which spread from Huiyuhao's body. After this, something shocking appeared. The temperature high up in the sky was naturally lower than on the ground. When that halo spread, all the water vapor and ice elements started to gather in Hui Yuhao's direction at an alarming speed. This was one of the two soul skills that the star anise mysterious ice grass had conferred to Hui Yuhao through that right leg bone, star anise ice coagulation. It was specially used to form ice elements. Even though it was just an auxiliary type soul skill, it was important to note that the star anise mysterious ice grass was a 100,000-year soul beast. This meant that the soul bone that it gave Hui Yuhao was also a 100,000-year soul bone. As the ice elements in the air formed, the aerial surveillance soul tools that were quickly rising into the air were affected by the temperature and ice elements. They rose slower and slower as the temperature of the air fell significantly. Following this, Hui Yuhao's right leg suddenly lit up with blinding, icy blue light. The projection of the star anise mysterious ice grass also ballooned significantly behind Hui Yuhao. After this, it turned into countless icy blue light projections that scattered all around before disappearing. In the air, ice spikes that were several meters long started to appear out of nowhere. They looked very astonishing from afar. It was as if a huge ice flower had formed at that instant. This ice flower covered a region that spanned close to 1,000 meters in diameter. As the region that it covered was extremely huge, the soul engineers that were pursuing Hui Yuhao subconsciously slowed down, and their expressions all changed. When soul masters cultivated and added soul rings, they would generally add a domain-type soul skill. Under certain special conditions, domain-type soul skills could be very useful. However, this domain-type soul skill was something that the soul engineers from the Sun Moon Empire were seeing for the first time in their lives. How ridiculous was it that it covered 1,000 meters? That was a full kilometer? Ice spikes filled that region completely. Such a domain-type attack was something they could hardly imagine. It could even rival some deadly soul tools. Hui Yuhao disappeared as the ice flower bloomed in the sky. However, those aerial surveillance soul tools faced a different fate. The thick ice spikes ruthlessly penetrated the metal outer shells of those soul tools. Piercing booms and scratching sounds started to resonate through the air. Even though not all the aerial surveillance soul tools had been engulfed, most of them were gathered here, as they were trying to capture Hui Yuhao. More than 60% of the aerial surveillance soul tools were destroyed just like that. The earlier blockade naturally ceased to exist. How could Hui Yuhao give up such a fantastic opportunity? He quickly changed directions and flew diagonally upwards to a greater altitude. Star Anise, I didn't expect this. This soul bone that you've given me is actually so powerful. Hui Yuhao complimented as he flew. The earlier attack had drained more than 30% of his soul power. However, Hui Yuhao was well aware that he couldn't possibly inflict such great damage if he purely used 30% of his soul power to attack. The earlier attack was completely reliant on the star anise mysterious ice grass help. The star anise gave Hui Yuhao 2 soul rings and 1 soul bone. Originally, Hui Yuhao didn't put too much hope in it. At some point, he had even forgotten the 2 soul skills that came with his right leg bone. After all, he already had the Sky Dream Ice Worm, Ice Empress and Snow Empress. Any one of them was much stronger than the ice grass. However, Hui Yuhao had gradually grown to understand the true meaning of the origin of ice after the Snow Empress guidance. At times, power wasn't everything. The best thing was something that suited one the most. His earlier attack was actually the combined effect of 3 soul skills. Among the 2 soul rings that the ice grass gave Hui Yuhao, the 6th soul ring carried a soul skill called Ultimate Ice Enhancement. It helped Hui Yuhao to greatly increase the strength of his ultimate ice. 100,000-year soul rings generally came with 2 soul skills, but the ice grass was a plant-type soul beast. It had fewer innate soul skills compared to most ordinary animal-type soul beasts. There were also 2 soul skills in its right leg bone. This was why it didn't have extra soul skills to confer to Hui Yuhao. The other 2 soul skills that took effect earlier came from the right leg bone. One of them was called Star Anise Ice Coagulation. This soul skill was very effective in tandem with Ultimate Ice Enhancement. It was also an important reason why Hui Yuhao's later strike was able to cover such a huge area. As for the ice spikes that had appeared, they came from the other soul skill of the right leg bone, called the Star Anise Omnithrust. One attack was enough. More than 60% of the Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion's aerial surveillance soul tools had been destroyed. Hua Yuhao felt great. The grim look on his face when he was pursued earlier had vanished completely. Without oscillation detectors locking onto him and with his imitation protecting him, detecting him would be extremely difficult. The Soul Engineers below tried to use 2 rounds of domain-type attacks, to no avail. Eventually, they had no choice but to retreat back to their base. Hua Yuhao was very pleased with how he had reacted to the situation. As he flew towards Dragon City, he silently thought to himself, if the earlier fight was on the ground, or if those people chasing me were a little closer, I could have directly used my ice explosion technique after my Star Anise Omnithrust. They'd have been completely blown apart. What if I used this combination on the Sun Moon Empire's military base? I should be able to cause quite a lot of damage to them. All this while, Hua Yuhao hadn't used any direct domain-type attacks. After trying it this time, he was rewarded with an unexpected result. Hua Yuhao escaped in delight, but the atmosphere in the Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion felt extremely repressed. He wouldn't have imagined that the Dark Red Commander's tent that he had tried to sneak into earlier actually had the Empress of the Sun Moon Empire inside. She was his former classmate and friend who was once under Xian Ziwen's guidance in the aspect of soul tool production, Zhu Zi. Zhu Zi looked very gloomy as she sat in the main seat in the commander's tent, decked in fiery red armor. Ever since she came to the Heavenly Soul Empire, she had never been on such a big losing end before. When she heard that more than 60% of the aerial surveillance soul tools had been destroyed, she stood up furiously and broke a glass cup that she normally liked very much. There were many senior soul engineers of the Legion standing below her. However, they were all very petrified now. They lowered their heads and didn't dare to utter a sound at all. Zhu Zi tried to suppress the fury in her heart and asked, "Can someone tell me what's going on?" A lady who was wearing the same red armor and who appeared to be about 40 years old stepped forward and said, "Commander, there seems to only be one enemy. However, this enemy is very strong. Be more specific." Zhu Zi said coldly, "Yes. This enemy should have been here to carry out surveillance. He was able to conceal himself using his own abilities or through a soul tool. After he entered our base, he seemed to be intending to carry out surveillance on this tent. After that, he attacked one of our soul engineers, triggering our linked soul tool. We immediately surrounded and attacked him. However, he was very sly, and his abilities were also very strong. He managed to break free from our initial encirclement and tried to escape by flying higher. To more accurately determine his position, we lowered our line of aerial surveillance soul tools and attempted to use an oscillation detection web to discover his exact position. Very soon, we pinpointed his location." As she spoke until here, she paused for a moment before saying with some difficulty, "We were about to succeed." However, he suddenly unleashed some kind of soul skill that stopped us from locking onto his position. After that, he rose into the sky at an alarming speed. As we pursued him, he reached the same altitude as our aerial surveillance soul tools. Following that, he unleashed an ice-type soul skill that covered a region spanning 1,000 meters in diameter. The entire sky was filled with ice spikes, destroying many of our aerial surveillance soul tools. Without the web, he concealed himself once again. We tried to use domain-type attacks on him, but they were useless. He managed to escape. Zhu Zi looked very serious after hearing this report. She furrowed her brow and paced up and down in the tent. Concealment. Yet another concealment. At the Mingdo mountain range, it was also because of a fellow who managed to carry out surveillance and used some unknown method to teleport so many titled Dolor in that it caused our defense to be overwhelmed. Eventually, we were trapped on the losing end. Don't tell me it's the same person? Or have the Star Luo and Heavenly Soul Empires found a method of creating soul tools that can help with concealment? As she spoke until here, Zhu Zi paused for a moment before revealing a pensive look on her face. The Mingdo mountain range's failed defense actually had a great impact on the Sun Moon Empire's overall situation in this war. Given the high status of the death god Dolor Yi Shishui, no one dared to question her at all. Yi Shishui didn't reveal any details of the fight. She only mentioned that the Star Luo Empire had a Soul Master who was very adept at concealment that used a special method to sneak into the Mingdo mountain range. Furthermore, this Soul Master brought in many title Doluo and caused significant damage to the defense line at the mountain range. To prevent damage of the Death God, she chose to retreat. This answer was extremely ambiguous to Ju Zi, and greatly affected her judgment. However, while she was the Empress, her position in the empire was nothing compared to Yi Shishui. As a result, she couldn't do anything even though she was doubtful. She could only plead to Xu Tianran to get to the bottom of things. Xu Tianran attempted to do so, but Yi Shishui didn't say anything else. As the emperor, he was also helpless. He couldn't afford to offend the Holy Ghost Church. The two ultimate Doluo in the Holy Ghost Church and many evil soul masters were the foundation of his plan to dominate the entire continent. This was why he couldn't do anything against the Death God Doluo. The Sun Moon Empire had a lot of confidence in their overall strength in this war. The invention of linked soul tools gave them an absolute advantage. However, in terms of high-level fighting strength, the Sun Moon Empire didn't have enough to defeat the Doluo continent's 3 native continents and Shrek Academy by themselves. Therefore, they had to rely on the Holy Ghost Church's power. The Holy Ghost Church was very formidable. Without discussing other things, the existence the Death God Doluo, Yi Shishui, and the Dragon Emperor Doluo, Long Xiaoyao meant they had 2 ultimate Doluo. That was enough to intimidate countless powerful title Doluo. From Ju Zi's perspective, if there weren't any unforeseen incidents, there wouldn't be any problem with Yi Shishui standing guard at the Mingdo mountain range. But who knew that the Star Luo Empire managed to break through in the end? Afterwards, the White Tiger Duke had used a very venomous strategy, and Ju Zi was still held back no matter how powerful she was. The White Tiger Duke had dispersed the Star Luo Empire's Soul Master legions, and deployed 5 legions with 30 soldiers in a team, which formed one unit. He divided them to go deep into the Sun Moon Empire to destroy things. They focused on destroying the Sun Moon Empire's granaries and armories in their respective cities. The Star Luo Empire had almost as many Soul Masters as the Sun Moon Empire did, and they didn't have many Soul Engineers. However, Soul Masters were as destructive as Soul Engineers when they unleashed their destructive power. There were at least 150 units of Soul Masters scattered into the Sun Moon Empire's territory. They retreated after an assault wherever they were attacking, and they immediately escaped beyond the horizon. They didn't give the Sun Moon Empire a chance to surround and kill him. They were practically engaging in guerrilla warfare, and they caused many losses to the Sun Moon Empire after little more than a month. The Sun Moon Empire's royal family had to pull back a few Soul Engineer legions because of that, and to defend their territory. They even deployed 2 of their Royal Soul Engineer legions, which were like their trump cards, so that they could surround the Star Luo Empire's units and establish defensive perimeters. Only then were they able to suppress the Star Luo Empire's Soul Masters that were undercover in their territory. But they were in a standoff at the moment. The Sun Moon Empire could only produce large amounts of aerial surveillance soul tools and rely on their surveillance to fight against the Star Luo Empire's Soul Masters in their territory. However, aerial surveillance soul tools were expensive to craft. The Sun Moon Empire's territory stretched over many kilometers, so they couldn't possibly cover every inch of land. Otherwise, the White Tiger Duke's strategy wouldn't have been so hard to deal with. Nobody was a match for the Death God Doluo in face-to-face battle, but the Death God Doluo was just a mortal, and not actually a god. She couldn't stretch her strength to cover overly large areas. The Soul Masters who were undercover in the Sun Moon Empire preoccupied them, while the White Tiger Duke himself led his remaining Soul Master legions to create defensive structures and perimeters at the Mingdo mountain range with the Star Luo Empire's Northwestern Field Army. They regained everything that they had lost before. The Sun Moon Empire could only maintain their current situation because the Star Luo Empire was holding them back. They didn't have more strength to continue their invasion, and this was especially so because the Sun Moon Empire didn't dare to attack in Shrek Academy's direction. Even the Holy Ghost Church were fearful of Shrek Academy. The Doluo continent's 3 native empires knew about Shrek Academy's battle against the Great Star Do Forest's Beast Wave, and the Sun Moon Empire had also received similar information. Xu Tianran turned pale with fright when he heard that Shrek Academy had pushed back the Great Star Do Forest's immense army, and when he heard that the dragon god Dolor, Mu-En, had reappeared. The darkness holy dragon, or the death god Dolor, Yishishue had told him long ago that everything between them could be discussed or worked out, but they would never directly participate in attacking Shrek Academy. Xu Tianran didn't have those two ultimate Dolor in his war against Shrek Academy. As of now, he didn't have any confidence in fighting an open battle against Shrek. Juzi personally returned to Radiant City, and they went through a series of military conferences after a deep chat with Xu Tianran. They finally decided that they should stabilize the current situation and consolidate, and that they had to assimilate as much of the territories that they had conquered in the Heavenly Soul Empire as possible. The commander that Hui Yuhao admired and respected was actually Ju Zi. Her reputation in the Sun Mu Empire was growing exponentially throughout this war. The Sun Moon Empire's current situation wasn't as good as it was in the beginning, and that was because the death god Dolor hadn't been able to defend the Mingdou mountain range, and had nothing to do with Ju Zi's war strategies and tactics. The Sun Moon Empire had conquered 2/3 of the Heavenly Soul Empire's territory with minimal costs and losses by following Ju Zi's war plan. She had earned a lot of credit for the Sun Moon Empire's glorious victories, expansion, and conquered territories. This was especially so because she had feigned an attack against the Star Luo Empire in the beginning, when her real target was the Heavenly Soul Empire, and when she made sure that the Star Luo Empire's intel and surveillance were locked down. She had accomplished great feats. Ju Zi had been lauded as the Sun Moon Empire's military genius after the war, one who only appeared once in a blue moon, and even the Queen's halo wasn't as bright as her own commander's. Ju Zi had increasingly more authority and influence. Besides the Sun Moon Empire's royal legions, the other 4 beast-ranked Soul Engineer legions were under her control. She was the commander-in-chief of the great army that was invading East. Xu Tianran trusted Ju Zi the most, and that was the reason why he was very assured that she held all the authority. She didn't disappoint him. After conquering large areas of the Heavenly Soul Empire, Xu Tianran was very supportive of penetrating those territories with soul tools and technology. Xu Tianran admired and respected Ju Zi, and he knew that he couldn't devise such strategies by himself. He held her in very high regard. This time, she had discreetly led an army of 20,000 to the Heavenly Soul Empire's northeastern region to investigate some mineral resources in the north. What were wars fought with? They were fought with resources and money. The Sun Moon Empire had been accumulating reserves for many years, and they were considered sufficiently prepared. However, Hui Yuhao had shaken them at their very core after the massive explosion that he had triggered inside Radiant City. Money and resources were continuously expended after the war started, and that was especially so for their rare metals. They were starting to run low. Therefore, the Sun Moon Empire had been trying to strengthen their search for mines and minerals recently, especially within the Heavenly Soul Empire. They would undoubtedly excavate and mine anything they discovered as quickly as possible. Ju Zi had received reliable reports from her people in the Heavenly Soul Empire saying that there was an enormous mine in the Heavenly Soul Empire's northern region, in the areas bordering the extreme north. There were more than 10 veins of rare metals that they could excavate there. She had sent someone to investigate the matter previously, and the report was confirmed. This mine was very close of the Douling Empire's northern borders, and it was positioned between the Heavenly Soul Empire and the Douling Empire. Before the Sun Moon Empire had started this war, the Heavenly Soul Empire and the Douling Empire had just discovered the existence of this mine. They hadn't had time to excavate it before the war had started. Therefore, the Sun Moon Empire would likely clash with the Douling Empire if they wanted to mine these resources. The Sun Moon Empire had very formidable tools for detecting rare metals. Ju Zi had instructed experts to do a serious investigation of this area before coming here, and her experts had told her that this mine held an extremely large volume of rare metals. If they could extract it, they would have enough to support another war. Ju Zi had reported that to Xu Tianran once she managed to confirm those reports. Rare metals had undoubtedly become the most important resource after accompanying soul engineers into the history of war. Xu Tianran wasn't assured at all to leave such important resources in the hands of just anyone. He decided after discussing with Ju Zi that she was to personally lead the Fire Phoenix Legion here, and she was to be in charge of excavating this mine. Besides this army of 20,000, there was to be an enormous team of excavators that would arrive later. However, they were going to mine in the extreme north, and the weather would greatly affect the speed and progress of excavation. The team needed time to prepare. Therefore, Juzi came first so that she could conquer and assimilate this entire place before making other plans. Hua Yuhao wouldn't know about all this if he had left with Nan Qiuqiu before. Destiny worked in such mysterious ways, and a single episode of deep meditation created an opportunity for him such that he could do reconnaissance like he did. How could she not be dejected? She hadn't accomplished her true aim of being here, and yet she had sustained such heavy losses. It wasn't hard to imagine how expensive soul detectors that were equipped to Beast Lord-ranked legions were, and even she couldn't bear a 60% loss. This was a colossal blow. Furthermore, she couldn't fathom what kind of soul master could achieve this feat if that individual was a soul engineer. Not even the Sun Moon Empire had any results in using soul tools for the art of concealment. Juzi didn't believe that the Doluo continent's 3 empires could surpass the Sun Moon Empire in this respect. If a single soul master did everything by himself, then wouldn't this soul master's abilities be far too powerful? He could conceal himself, and he could unleash ice-type soul skills over large areas. She had never heard of any titled Doluo that could achieve all that. Pass down my orders. Everyone in the Fire Phoenix Legion is to move at once. Everyone will hold oscillation detectors to search within 30 kilometers of the army camp. However, don't affect Dragon City, so that we don't affect our plan to assimilate the city through our technology. Yes? Her subordinate soul engineers acknowledged at once and departed swiftly. Juzi frowned tightly as she calculated in her head, and considered where the person who was investigating them came from. The Heavenly Soul Empire shouldn't have any strength left to conduct such reconnaissance in the northern regions, and they would definitely use an individual with such impressive scouting abilities on the battlefield. The Douling Empire was in the same situation. They were teamed up with the Heavenly Soul Empire, and their army was in a standoff against her own army on the battlefield. They wouldn't have anybody to deploy into the northern regions. She hadn't even attempted to excavate